Okay, guys, we just finished ecology and we're going to start on the last unit of the year. So, guys, we have about 4 weeks left and we will do about 4 weeks of evolution and then we'll kind of wrap up with the year. Okay, so now that we're done with ecology, guys, you need to go back. You need to make sure you turned in all of your ecology assignments for this virtual learning. If you need to redo anything, you can redo it. And I will be emailing those guys that need to turn anything in, and I'll just make sure that we're all up to date. Okay, so we're going to talk about Darwin and his theory of evolution. Okay, so see if you can find the insect here. Give you a second. Okay, if you can't see it, it's right here. Okay, there's its face. And this is part of it. How does its structure help its survival? Well, if you notice, it kind of looks like the leaf itself. And so when predators, I mean, we're zoomed in really close, but when predators are up above, like birds and things like that, it blends in with the leaves. So it doesn't really know to go there and that it's not a leaf. So it helps with camouflage for its survival. So let's talk about evolution. Now, before I start this, I know this can be a very controversial topic. And so let me start off with saying this, guys. A lot of times there's a conflict between religion and evolution. And if you are religious, I am in no way telling you to give up your beliefs, that this is the ultimate truth. What theory, and guys, remember, evolution is a theory. It's supported by tons of evidence. It has multiple experiments that have been conducted and it's supported theory. And where religion is a belief system. Okay, and so a lot of time they're like, well, you can only do one. And that's not true. If you are very strong in your religion, you can also support the theory of evolution while also being religious. So, I don't want to get into debate here, evolution versus religion. They're two completely separate things. And it's okay to believe in both. Really believe in religion and then support the theory of evolution. So what exactly is evolution? It's change in populations over time. And we can actually see these happening. Some are on a small scale. Most of them are over millions of years, but sometimes we can see them on a small scale. This is the process by which modern organisms have descended from ancient organisms. And also, too, guys, a big misconception about evolution is, I'm sure you guys are thinking this, the first thing that comes to mind is monkeys, that we came from monkeys. And that's not really what it's saying. What it's saying is that there is a common ancestor between monkeys and humans that shared similar characteristics. So not necessarily saying we just came from monkeys. Okay, so what is a theory? Theory is a scientific explanation that unifies a broad range of observations. So guys, this is backed by multiple experiments, a lot of evidence and support before it has become a theory. Okay, so before Darwin, let's talk about the scientist. His name was Lamarck. Okay, now you're going to laugh at his ideas, and it's okay. They're kind of funny, but guys, remember they didn't know anything about DNA. They didn't know anything about genetics. They don't really know that much. So yes, it's funny what he thought is happening, but this is what he thought. Okay, his theory was called the use and disuse theory. So basically what he thought is the parts of an organism's body that aren't used or developed, those parts that are not used get smaller, which is called atrophy, and eventually disappear. So for example, let's say you were working at a shop and you predominantly use your right hand, but not your left hand. And more you're using your right hand, not really using your left hand. Eventually, over time, your left hand would get smaller. And eventually, maybe you wouldn't even have a left hand anymore. And so when you were to go to have children, then your children wouldn't have left hands anymore. Or think of it this way too. If I were to get into a car accident and I lost my right arm, based on Lamarck's theory, he thought because I didn't have a right arm, that when I had kids, my kids wouldn't have a right arm. And we know that with DNA and genetics that my DNA was not programmed like that. Just an outside environmental car accident caused that to happen. So that doesn't mean my kids will not have right arms because of our DNA. But again, remember Lamarck didn't know that. And then he thought things that you use. I think we have a picture here. Oh, no, we don't. Things that you use. So like think of a crab that has claws. Let's say it needed to catch big fish. So over time and over time, its claws got bigger and bigger, then its kids would have bigger claws. So we know this is not the true theory, but again, remember guys, that's all they had back then. So Charles Darwin, he guys is the founder of evolution. He's the one that came up with all these different ideas. So it was a while ago, mid 1800s. He is a British naturalist from a prominent family. His family was very well known, so throughout Britain. So for 5 years, he took an unpaid visit on the HMS Beagle, which is a ship, and he helped on the ship to keep his, since he wasn't getting paid, to keep his stay there, essentially. And he did a lot of different things. He made observations, he collected specimens, he found fossils, and this is kind of where he started to develop his ideas. Okay, where did he go? So he's from Britain here, and he went to South America, the Galapagos, that's where he's most famous for, New Zealand, Australia, South of Africa, so kind of more tropical and warm climates. Okay, so this is on D. What did he discover? Patterns of diversity. So animals are well suited in their own environment. So for example, you wouldn't find a penguin or you wouldn't find a seal basically in Africa kind of thing. So like the colder environments would have colder animals that were suited there, where the warmer environments had animals that were suited there. Some animals only live in one area of the world. So it's kind of like the biomes, right? If it lives in a tropical rainforest in one area, it's probably going to live in a tropical rainforest in a different area. So like I said, we found kangaroos in Australia. You probably wouldn't find them in Antarctica. Okay, he found living organisms and fossils. Fossils are preserved remains of ancient organisms. What was really cool, and imagine being Darwin during this time. So some fossils looked like organisms still alive today, which makes sense. But then he would dig up some fossils that looked nothing like was alive. And so like we know that there are species that are no longer living, but think back then they didn't know that. So they're finding all these fossils, and it's not from organisms that are alive today, which would be crazy to think about. Okay, we can also have different types of fossils, which we'll talk later about in the next few weeks, but we can have the actual bones, or we could have imprints. So it's not the bones themselves, but is imprinted on some sort of usually rock item. Okay, he's mostly famous for the Galapagos Islands. This is the islands that are west of South America. And even though they're pretty close, each island is very different from one another. They have different wind, they have different temperatures, and it's kind of crazy because they're right there next to each other, but they are very different. And so Darwin's most famous for his study of finches, which is a type of bird. So all these finches used to be the same species and they came from the same common ancestor, but over time they went to different islands. Well, each island has different vegetation. So you can see here, this bird is eating berries where one might eat a bug or a large seed. So if you look at their beaks, he's famous for studying their beak. Because even though they're all finches, they have different beak shapes. And how did they get different beak shapes? Over time, they evolved to fit whatever food was available on the island. So this one with a longer, sharp beak, might be eating larger seeds or an insect to be able to kill it. Short beak might have like grass or smaller seeds. Which leads us to natural selection. Okay, natural selection is where the environment selects which species can live. And a lot of people think like, it's called the fittest or the survival of the fittest. They think, oh, it's the biggest one or the strongest one. And that could not be the case. It could be the smallest one. It's whatever nature selects. So like using Darwin's finches as an example, whatever food was available, that's the type of beak that nature would select. The rest wouldn't reproduce and survive. And so over time, we're going to see that trait being selected. So how does natural selection occur? Well, when you have a lot of species, if we have overpopulation, only some are going to survive. Struggle for existence. Okay, there has to already be variations in the population. Okay, there's different beak shapes already, and then whatever one fits will survive. Okay, some variations are favorable and help survival. And again, this is all based on the environment. The environment picks which one is most likely to survive. Okay, those organisms with the greatest number of favorable variations will survive and reproduce. And this is called survival of the fittest. Fitness is the ability of an organism to survive and reproduce. And guys, remember, this isn't the biggest or the strongest, whatever the environment is choosing in that moment.